Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
My name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. So should I start singing Come Home Cardinal Pell, or do you guys want to sing it? I know it's obviously hard for us to sync our voices over Discord, but I just feel as though...
I have no idea what that song is, just
come
to be
home,
clear.
Cardinal Pell, come down from your citadel. It was when he went off to Rome.
Tim Minchin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was when he was in the Vatican and, he was refusing to come back to Australia to, front the Royal Commission about what he knew. And so Tim Minchin was just like, I'm just going to write this song that's all like, come home, because you probably totally know something. And if you don't know something and I'm defaming you, you'll have to come back to sue me.
Love Tim Minchin. Anyway, the song's since been modified to Come Home, Cardinal Pell. We've got your seat warm in hell.
Very nice. Yeah,
which I don't know.
Home in this context.
I personally think that's in bad taste, but that's what all the kids on TikTok are saying. So,
nah, you know what? I think it's fair.
I looked it up.
People have done all the gags of, you've heard of Elf on a Shelf. What about Cardinal Pell in Hell? Or someone did, Elf on a Shelf or a Freddo on a pedo. With things. Or the people have been doing all those sorts of things.
I looked it up.
He seems like a piece of shit.
Legally, you can't defame a dead person. So let's go nuts, boys.
Except in Tasmania, unless that's changed.
It's a bit iffy in Tasmania. Yeah, that's true. But fortunately, we record in Melbourne, so only Victorian laws apply to us.
No, that's not how the internet works. But you know what? Let's not get bogged down with that.
That's all right. So, as you might have heard, Cardinal George Pell, Australia's highest ranking Catholic cleric, I'm not going to make that joke, has died in Rome at the age of 81. So he was undergoing, I believe it was surgery for a hip issue that he was having, and complications, died of cardiac arrest on the table. God rest his soul, if ever it is found. Cardinal Pell, who was in charge of Vatican finances between 2014 and 2019, as you may know, was jailed in Australia for child sexual abuse in 2019, but vigorously maintained his innocence, and he had his convictions quashed more than a year later as a result of the
High Court overturned it.
So there's been a lot of interesting commentary around our thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers go out to Pell and his family. There was a great quote from Dan Andrews where he's like, obviously we're sorry for the family who's going through a very difficult time. Also, who's going through a difficult time, the victim survivors of child sexual abuse.
Yeah, I rather appreciated that candor, like when someone was like, so are you going to do a state funeral for George Pell, given his prominence in Victoria, way back when? And his response was, no, I don't think, I'm not quoting him, but it's like, no, but I don't think, that would be very awful for, I think, survivors of child sex abuse, to do that. So no, we're not going to do that. I was there's a refreshing bluntness out of it. Whilst Anthony Albanese said something like, I understand Catholics, this is a difficult day for them.
When I grew up in Merrickville,
what's with those who are mourning?
As the son of a single mother.
He didn't say he was a good guy, but he didn't say he wasn't a good guy either, and just gave a real wet fart of a nothing response.
Otherwise
known as Prime Minister, isn't it?
Otherwise known as the Albanese.
Otherwise known as we only just clawed back power from this crazy Liberal government. I'm not going to ruffle any feathers.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Cardinal Pell, there's a great quarterly essay from some years ago in 2013 written by David Marr called The Prince, Faith, Abuse and George Pell, which details a lot of his early career in what was called in his earlier career, he was friends with Gerard Ridsdale, I believe in Ballarat, who was a convicted pedophile in the 80s. He was convicted, and even after that, George Pell was still visiting him and giving him support and providing succor and nourishment in the form of friendship to a convicted pedophile. The allegations were that he, knew about what Ridsdale was doing and participated in it, potentially even as well.
Yeah, did the whole shuffle Rooney.
And later on in his career, he was also famous for the Melbourne response, which was essentially a way to have victims of child sexual abuse gagged in exchange for capped compensation amounts of up to $50,000. So basically, like, yes, the church acknowledges this happened. Probably wasn't as bad as you say. But here's some money as long as you sign this NDA. Yeah. So real piece of shit. And that's
dead. Before we even get into the conviction beyond a reasonable doubt by one jury and then overturned by the High Court later. And everyone's been discussing like, oh, so he did it. Oh, no, he didn't. He was exonerated. Oh, he did it. He's dead. We can't defame him now. We can just say, woo, file. But like, even before you think about all that, he knew all these other things going on and facilitated covering it up or hushing it. So
at the
real piece of shit case, before we even think about that.
Best case scenario, complete piece of shit who helped cover up child sexual abuse, not disputed. Mm-hmm. Best case scenario, that was the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, potentially actually a pedophile himself, as he was convicted in a court of law for being. Adam's been very silent. I would like to throw to Adam for his comments.
Much to say. I was like, he's dead. Okay. Anyway, it's the end of a saga, I guess. It puts a nice little ribbon on the end of it. You can have it. You can have it. It's fine.
I'll be happy when Trump dies. I'll be happy when Bolsonaro dies. Like, sometimes there are just bad people in this world, and whilst I don't advocate the killing of them for legal reasons, and for reasons of morality,
and legal reasons,
and other reasons, I think the world is better off without certain people in it, and I think Cardinal George Pell is one of those people. So just let me know.
I find it interesting. There was a lot of talk about his latest activities since he got out of jail, and then he basically flew back to the Vatican. He's been very, like, he's not really an active cardinal anymore. Like, because he's over the age of 80, he wasn't allowed to be as part of like the next group of cardinals or to elect the next pope. So he's sort of effectively
Cardinal Emeritus.
He's basically cardinal retired. Pretty much.
Age limit on the cardinals being allowed to pick the new pope.
Yeah, you can't.
You can be too old to be an old stuffy cardinal.
Yeah, I don't know if that's been a rule forever, but it's something that is currently the case. So he basically, I guess, is for all intents and purposes, he's he's dead now, a role in the church. But what he was doing, which I found really interesting.
So he got away with it for his entire life, basically. He got away with it.
What he was doing was writing critical essays of Pope Francis. Now, Pope Francis is like, in the conservative nature of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis is seen by some to be a bit of a reformer. He's made vague acknowledgements of gay people and other things, which
I believe
you wouldn't have found
in regards
any
to gay
other
people. He said, "Who am I to judge?" Which was seen as very progressive, and my response was, "The Pope, the guy who has the red phone to Jesus. You are the person who allegedly can speak to God." So that would make you a pretty important person to be able to judge whether homosexuality was right or not. I'm sure if you look in the bylaws, it's still not too crash hot with the Catholics. But I guess that was his attempt at sort of slowly nudging the
pendulum.
Nudging the pendulum in a more progressive direction.
Effectively, what he's been doing is basically he wrote an anonymous essay, I think it was last year, under a pseudonym, basically criticizing Pope Francis. That there's more corruption now, in the Vatican, misspending of funds, and like it wouldn't have happened under his watch and all this kind of shit. And then he actually wrote an essay with his own. The guy
who headed up the hush money response to say that church money isn't being used to the best of his ability. He says with his Louis Vuitton red slippers on.
George, that money could be better used hushing up victims of child sex abuse.
Exactly.
Of course.
Think of the opportunity.
But he wrote another essay quite recently. I think it's actually come out now. I'm not sure whether it was one that was released on his death or whether it came out like literally like the week before he died or something. But yeah, same thing. But he didn't use a pseudonym this time. He just actively, it was just like, the church has basically lost its way and we've lost all our conservative values and all this kind of shit. But I mean, so even to the death,
like forcing oral sex on a 12-year-old in the rectory, like those sort of conservative values. Yeah.
Even, I guess my point being is, even to the last minute, he was still someone that was like anything that you could argue might be somewhat progressive in the church, he was trying to stop it.
Good guy, cool and
yeah, I mean, there will be some people that will view this differently, obviously, but
Tony Abbott being one of them. If you saw what he put out recently, the former
Tony
PM,
Tony's been a big supporter of George Pell's. What did he say?
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
I think he basically drew a comparison between George Pell's time in prison before the ruling was overturned to being crucified like Jesus.
Honestly,
calling him like a saint and all this sort of stuff.
Jesus
and the Australian
Christ.
had like an 8-page spread about him, and every headline I've seen about him has been like, his divisive legacy, and it's like, no, we can just say, ding dong, the witch is dead.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to keep like both sides in this.
Yeah,
like,
you don't have to say
now.
Divisive legacy. Some people think he was fucking excellent. Other people think he was potentially a pedophile. It'd just be like, he was an important figure who died.
Yep. Yeah, there are definitely a lot of people that are supportive of him. Like, I remember walking down to work down William Street past the was it the High Court or no, the Supreme Court here in Victoria. This is probably like 7 years ago, and there were people, both sides from both camps, protesters out the front, ready to, like, survivors of child sex abuse, and on the other side, like, Catholics, like, willing to have a go at him, to go have a go at them rather. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I think we can probably start to move on from some of this and reset the narrative with him gone. It means that, as with all conservatives, as the older generation start to die, the progressive values of the next generation will start to potentially come through. Although, as to how that works with religion, I don't know.
Yeah, we can get some really progressive Catholic priests who maybe don't rape kids this generation.
Hopefully.
It'd be
Let's
nice.
try. It's a crazy idea.
Nice.
Let's see if it works.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting that they age out at 80 in the Catholic Church. An age cap, which I'm not aware of something like that exists in the Australian Parliament. So is this potentially one area in which the Vatican is more progressive than the Australian Parliament by having age caps? I don't know.
I mean, how fucking
old men with dementia electing the next pope? That wouldn't work.
Yeah,
well, it doesn't matter. It's divine providence.
Again?
God's telling them what to do. So it doesn't matter if they've got dementia, right? It's the divine will.
I would elect my pet rhinoceros.
Yeah,
okay, Gerald.
So Joe Biden only recently just turned 80. So, if he was a cardinal, he wouldn't be allowed to make decisions anymore.
But it's okay. He's the most powerful man in America.
He's the most powerful man in the world.
But still can't remember where he puts his top secret documents, as you might have heard this week.
Yeah. It's bad when you do the thing that you were railing against the other guy for doing. It's not a good look.
When I heard that story, so for those who don't know, there was some context there. So Joe Biden's lawyer at the Pell Biden Center discovered some documents intermixed with some of his other documents that were confidential, and they turned them over to the Justice. I think it was the Justice Department or the whoever's responsible for the documents that said, hey, we've accidentally, realized that we've got some top secret documents and we want to return them. 6 weeks later, more documents were found in his residence in Delaware as well. Which
from his time as vice president. So it's not that he did this Obama recently, but it's like, he just took, just like Trump, took home some confidential shit, and there's a special counsel been appointed and everything, and it's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, so now it's
you can't do that.
Predictably turned into a shit show where the conservatives, the right-wing media is going, see, it's just as bad as the Trump thing. Basically, they both have the same as Hillary's emails. I've seen the documents. It turns out the two scandals are nothing alike because it seems like it was an accident, and when it was discovered, they turned it over immediately. Versus Trump, where
he declassified them with his mind.
It took boxes and boxes of documents home. When the Library of Congress said, "Hey, do you have those documents?" He went, "Nah," and they're like, "We think you do." And he goes, "Here's some of the documents." And they go, "We think you got more documents." And he goes, "Nah," and then they go, "The FBI is coming. Do you have those documents?" He's like, "Nah," and then the FBI had to raid his house and found a bunch of documents which, a bunch of which were the most classified types of documents. So it's not really the same, but I think the Conservatives have already done a good enough job of muddying the waters and turning it into a shit show where it's like, well, both of them are equally as bad because they both had documents anyway.
They've already said now that they've sorted out the shit show of the Speaker of the House, they've already started launching, investigations and committees.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're like, forget the Hunter Biden thing. That was bullshit. Like, we don't even really, that was just an excuse. So turns out we've actually got some meat on the bone now for us to argue about. It's so funny that the Democrats are so good. I'm sure if that was like if that was a Republican president who found those documents in his house or, in the Penn Biden Center or whatever it was, they just burn them. They just be like, fuck it, and just destroy the documents. Like, the Democrats like, no, we're the good boys. We've got to turn them in, do the right thing. It's just so annoying that, the Republicans make up their own standard and then the Democrats hold themselves up to a higher standard, which only lets them get attacked by the Republicans. It's so stupid. Just a week ago, it was Republicans in disarray, Kevin McCarthy, the House, 15 votes. Like, within 1 week, the news cycle's completely shifted again. I was like, God damn it. Just give us 1 week. Just 1 week of good news stories for the Democrats. Come on.
Speaking of trying to do the right thing, it's probably an interesting segue into...
speaking of past actions coming back to bite you.
Sure,
let's go with that.
There's a lot of analogies you could pull out of this, but New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet gave a very interesting press conference the other day.
He did indeed. Would you like to hear
let's listen. Yeah, let's listen to the man himself, and we can hear what he had to say.
When I was 21, at my 21st fancy dress party, I wore a Nazi uniform. I'm deeply ashamed of what I did, and I'm truly sorry for the hurt and the pain that this will cause people right across our state, and particularly members of the Jewish community, Holocaust survivors, veterans and their families. I'm truly sorry for that terrible mistake. I was naive. I didn't understand the significance of that decision, the hurt and the pain of what that uniform represents, particularly to the millions of Jewish people who died in the Holocaust and the impact on them. You've got to understand the significance of it.
I'm not sure whether the volume was a bit quiet there, but he wore a Nazi uniform.
Yeah, and it was that he brought this up apropos of nothing was another interesting part.
Hey, Dom, how's your Monday? Well, funny story. I wore a Nazi uniform as a 21-year-old, so this is a serious press conference, not a jokey one.
The press conference. I don't believe journalists knew what they were coming in to hear. So yeah, it would have been quite a surprise to be bringing forth this information unprompted, at least by the press. That's probably one of those days you remember for ages if you're in the press corps. You're like, oh, okay, wow. Yeah, so it's kicked off a lot of discussions, just particularly around, people talking about
Nazism.
Nazism, accountability for past actions. Can people change? Can for me, it kind of has left me thinking about how I feel like when people have brought up that, you've gone through schooling, you're 21, you're all that sort of stuff. It's like, no, you get taught how, like, what the Nazis did and represented. And not to defend Perrottet too much, but I'd argue almost not quite, I feel, in school sometimes. Like, I think I've learned, as in educating us properly on
the Holocaust,
the true extent on like the true horror of things like the Holocaust and the Nazis. Like, you learn they're bad and lots of people died, but it's not until sort of into my adult life that I think I encountered a lot more detailed information of like truly how horrific these sorts of things are. But yeah, anyway, so it's had a lot of people talking about that sort of stuff, but also that the information, like the reason that he appears to have come out and just revealed this detail is because of potential strong arming by another member of his party. Seems to be the allegation.
Are you saying he didn't do this out of the goodness of his heart and he's potentially trying to get ahead of something? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he didn't. It doesn't appear like he just woke up one morning and was like, fuck, remember when I did that? Oh, God, no, I feel I owe people an apology. No, I think someone, I don't have the name of the MP in front of me here because I think it's since come out who that may have been, but like someone approached him to be like, you know, there's photos, bro, and they are having a bit of a disagreement about a certain policy around cashless card systems being used in like gambling venues and pokey venues and stuff, which I don't know if you guys have been to Sydney recently, but holy fuck, there's a lot of pokies rooms, so it's a huge deal in Sydney, any kind of gambling changes or reform. So yeah, to get out ahead of it, he Alexander Hamiltoned himself. Like, you know, don't let someone else ruin your day. Ruin your own damn day. You drop the news first before they can drop it about you. I'll ride my way out. Yeah, essentially. Except in Hamilton's case, who cares who I damage in the process? Namely, I don't know, my wife. But
well, I think the same could be said here. I don't think Dom Perrottet's wife is super thrilled about him announcing
probably
that
not
he
super
dressed
thrilled.
up as a Nazi at his 21st birthday. The thing is, it was his 21st birthday, so he got to decide the theme, and he
did decide the theme. Uniforms, something that includes the theme.
Yeah,
uniforms, and I imagine it was
specifically. I've got this sweet Nazi uniform that I wanted to trot out at some point. You know what I mean? It could have been like hookers and pimps, or like it's your 21st. You get to choose what it is. He's like, no. I want something that lets me dress up as a Nazi.
At the same time as Prince Harry doing it as well. Is that like a part of a vibe that was happening culturally at the time where Nazi uniforms were back in vogue?
In the early 2000s, I really do think it was more of a like shitty edge post, like you're an edgy fucking comic guy. Yeah. Whoa, he doesn't play by the rules. He doesn't like this PC culture. He's dressing up as a Nazi. What?
Too challenging for you, as James Acaster jokes about with transphobic jokes.
Yes, exactly.
It's too challenging for you. You can't handle the fact that I'm here in a Nazi uniform at my own party. Troll.
With that said, I don't think there's any photos of me, and unless I did The Sound of Music or something when I was younger, there's no photos of me dressed as a Nazi under any circumstances. And I don't know that
I think context is key.
99.999% recurring confident that there is no imagery of me associated with Nazism. And I grew up
to a costume shop and then bought an unlicensed, old school soldier uniform.
Hugo Boss style uniform.
Yeah.
I mean, we're only 10 years younger than him. I don't think it wasn't.
That's the other part of this that's bananas as well. Everyone's like,
long ago. It wasn't the 60s or something. It was like, it was just a freewheeling culture, man. I was a young kid. I had no idea what I was doing. It's like, this is 20 years ago. Like, I feel like we're pretty firmly still on the Nazis are bad.
I mean, yes,
at that point,
but not to play devil's avocado too much, but I certainly remember, because he's, I think that's what's been breaking people's brains a little bit. He's 40, so that means this happened in 2003. So put that in perspective. The current, New South Wales Premier turned 21 in 2003, which makes people go, that's so recent. But I was in year 8. I think then in high school, and I shudder to think of not only what I do remember of the kinds of edgy comedy that we all thought made us cool and clever that I would have either laughed at or participated in.
But I definitely know it at 21.
This shit I don't remember.
At 21, I thought I was very immature, but I was not at all mature. I was a fucking idiot. So, I mean, but would I have worn a Nazi uniform? Probably not.
No, I probably wouldn't have done that. But you know, I know for a fact I've probably laughed or told some very like poor taste, like Nazi jokes. Like, I'll admit that I've done that.
Tom
before.
Heath coming out as a fascist on the podcast. Like, you're about to get cancelled, buddy.
Well, yeah, probably. It's the kind of thing that's like, you know, on the similar scenario of this, of the, if I acknowledge it and provide details and apologize for it, yeah, that would be like, that's exactly this sort of situation, right? Of like, oh, okay, so what do we do about this? Does it mean if he did this 20 years ago, is he a turbo fascist sympathizer and shouldn't have his office? Or do you accept that people can be different people 20 years later? Like, you know, that's when we get into this massive discussion, right? Yeah. A friend of my fiance's put it really well on Twitter, talking about, like, are we going to buy into the concept of original sin, essentially, of like, are we all fixed creations of our environments and not ever changing across time? Like, anything you do is an implicit facet of who you are permanently, regardless of anything you do or say since. And like, yeah, it's where it's really tricky. I don't have the big, fantastic, huge answer. And also I don't like Dominic Perrottet for a litany of reasons, but it's the sort of thing of, I don't know. He's like, I don't know. I feel he seems genuine to me in his apology, at least, but it's
very slowly and very carefully is the only other thing I would say.
Well, I think you have to speak very slowly and carefully of that, because,
hey guys,
you know, if you just throw anything like, you know, I did something like it was real funny at the time, but clever too. Gee, I looked snappy and like did it like no.
Say what you want about those Nazis. They knew how to dress.
And I think I've made that joke before, which is pretty terrible. So I think it's a wild, tricky one. And though I think a part of it that at first glance made me go like, well, that's big of them, but then I went, wait a minute, was that the Labor opposition party in New South Wales has come out and said that they don't believe he should have to resign over this scandal. I mean, there's an election in 10 weeks, so they probably don't want the person who's just admitted to doing something very offensive to very offensive to resign, because they're like, good, maybe they'll vote for us instead of him.
I think, I'm inclined to align with you, Tom, there, that it's like, I don't think it should be a political career ender. He did seem like, you know, genuinely sorry for the hurt he's caused. I do think people change. I do think, you know, I don't think it was done out of malice. I think, as we were saying, it's sort of a shitposty kind of like bad humor of the early 2000s. Yeah.
But I think it should acknowledge it's not okay. Like,
it's not okay.
Yeah. And he shouldn't be coming out and saying, I would, like, it was okay for me. Like, it's okay that I've done this because I was young and didn't understand, and I'm sorry. It's like, no, that still doesn't make it retroactively okay. What you did was wrong, and that doesn't change.
However, I am aware that like three white guys, or, you know, two white guys, one Italian guy, Italians fought on the sides of the Nazis, guys. Everyone, Italy seems to skate a little scot-free on that one.
And also three non-Jewish guys as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's my point, is that I think it's probably more up to the Jewish community as to whether he should be forgiven and to what extent it's going to impact his political career as a result. I think it's really strange, though, because when you graduate from university and you're no longer a young liberal, they make you give back the uniform. So I don't know why he still had it, but
you made a joke about the Liberal Party. Interestingly enough, it's probably, I could be making broad conclusions here, but I mean, a lot of Jewish voters are probably Liberal voters as well, you would think.
Well, so, I guess, that's another interesting part as well, right? Like, I mean, I live in a particularly big Jewish area, and it's also, well, until relatively recently, a very liberal area as well, federally. State-wise, we still have a Liberal MP. So...
I guess the thing that breaks my brain is that if what you've said is true, Tom, where he was strong-armed, I mean, obviously he's getting out ahead of it for some reason, but if it's because of
control the story and the narrative before pictures start floating around on Twitter of you doing some Zikiles.
This probably says something larger about the state of the New South Wales Liberal Party, is
if you're trying to strong arm each other internally rather than it's not the opposition that's dropping this on him.
Well, there's that. But then that's very House of Cards-esque and sort of,
that was a storyline, wasn't it? Frank, what's his name's dad was in Underwood. Frank Underwood's dad was in the KKK, and then they found some pictures of it. Like that was a whole storyline in House of Cards.
I might have stopped watching before that happened. I don't remember that.
And it was like a big political scandal at the time. Now he'd probably get elected again as a result. But
if you assume though that the policy is to have cashless gambling cards, which is meant to, in theory, depending on how you roll it out, depending on who's got Batada and God knows what else.
Yes.
But in theory, it's meant to reduce problem gambling or help at least stem the tide, so to speak.
Yeah, at least be able to track problem gamblers and who they are.
So there is allegedly a member of the Victorian Liberal Party who is against that.
Who is willing to blow up his own party in order to be able to prevent the rollout of such a card.
Yep. And is also, you'd have to assume to some extent, like I'm sure there would be lobbyists that have probably gone to him and said,
"You got to
hey, why would you do that? That's like a career ender for you as the MP." So
every party's got factions, right? Like I don't think it's any surprise that there's some sort of internal power struggle, and I don't think it's a coincidence that it's happening 10 weeks before election day. But yeah, I don't know. It seems
more concerning to me that you're going to an election to elect a bunch of guys that are willing to just
knife each other.
A knife in 10 weeks out from an election.
Who are they? The Labour Party?
And also to go against a policy which is arguably relatively good. It's not going to stop pokies. Like it
might reduce pokey usage if it reduces problem. I don't have the details on why they think that'll happen.
As you say, Adam, it depends on who rolls it out, who has the data. Because I could easily see a scheme like this where, if the casinos own the data as to who's gambling and how often, how frequently, it's not that different from a loyalty scheme. The entire point of which is to encourage people to spend more money at your establishment, right? So I don't know if the details have necessarily been thought out, and I don't know that the casinos in various states have necessarily been given the latitude. They don't necessarily have the technical infrastructure to pull something like this off, certainly not in the timelines that are being talked about. So
every single machine, like in the casino, in each pub, like you have to, or can you? Yeah, it's
a huge technical challenge as well, which I don't think has really been talked about. But
and it really is in each pub. I was in Sydney recently. They refer to like the areas of Sydney pubs that have the pokies and all that sort of stuff in them as VIP rooms. And they usually have like a sign out the front with like kind of like, the Hollywood Broadway like globes around it being like VIP room and da-da-da-da-da. And yeah, like my initial impression when I got to Sydney was like, there's a fucking lot of strip clubs around. Like that was just the vibe that it looks like.
Yeah.
It looks like the kind of things you see on King Street here in Melbourne. I was just like, fuck, there's a strip club on every corner in Sydney.
No.
Like, this is nuts.
It's for the very important people. It's the very important people who've got a roll of 20-cent coins in their pocket. Those are the VIPs that we're speaking to.
Yeah, it's a very big deal in New South Wales, any kind of reform in this regard. But yeah, so it's also a thing of like, I know I don't have sort of the full details across the legislation and how it's being rolled out, who has the data, etc. But it's also like disappointing to see that if someone was willing to be like, hey, Perrottet was in a Nazi uniform in his youth, I want to use this to get him to do what I want, that the thing that you want him to do isn't maybe the good thing. Yeah. Like, it's to maybe not do a policy that could curb problem gambling.
Tom, so it's like, are you saying that the raw exercise of political power and smoky backroom deals isn't necessarily done for the benefit of the populace? No. Vote one Brutus. Vote one Brutus. Woohoo! We want the guy who stabs the other guy in the back. Yeah, that's our guy.
Yeah. If he can't do it, no one will. Yeah. So I don't know. Do we have any further thoughts on a fancy dress party incident, as he put it? Which I was a bit like, no, just costume party. Just say that. Fancy dress party.
Fancy.
Like, as someone who loves a costume party, like a lot of my big milestone birthdays have been costume party ones. fancy dress. I don't know. If you're dressing up fancy, you're in suits and gowns and like all that sort of stuff.
This is why I don't like costume parties, because 20 years from now, you're going to pull some crazy picture of me dressed up as the Cat in the Hat, and all of a sudden I'm going to lose, the premiership here in Victoria.
That's true. I mean, if anyone finds out that you were Rex Banner at my 30th, you're fucked.
Mm.
You don't even remember who Rex Banner is, do you?
From The Simpsons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the beer baron. Or he's hunting the beer baron.
No, you won't. I'll get you, beer baron. Yeah. No, you won't.
Yeah. Look at me, Rex Banner. I have a new hat. I love The Simpsons. Anywho, if we haven't got
what if though? This is a segue.
Ooh, we're getting into conjecture territory. All right, let's do some definition.
What if we came dressed as ex-One Nation Senator Rod Culleton?
Well, I do have a fifth of whiskey lying around in my house, so does that help?
I mean,
I am packing.
His most recent appearance at court would be a good outfit, like that kind of sky blue blazer, coffee cup, mess your hair up a little bit.
Oh, he definitely looks like he does DeFi in the Northern Beaches somewhere. He's just like, bro, I've been in sales for 45 years in the fintech space. We're doing a new startup. It's fucking rad. Like that's the vibe I get off this picture of Rod Culleton. It's just like an old finance guy who reckons he's finally hit it big with some fucking new financial wizardry nonsense.
So yes, good segue into this story about Rod Culleton. Rod Culleton, who was a former One Nation senator and then an independent senator for a bit a while ago. I think he hasn't been in Parliament for a while now, I think. Like, did they not win? He founded a new party, I thought, in 2019, but I don't think...
Great Australian Party.
Yeah, they didn't get very far.
The non-great Australian Party.
The Gap Party, as in there's a gap between their two ears where their brains should be.
Should being the operative word. Rod Culleton and a woman named Rosalind Jane Stewart faced trial this past week because they're alleged to have not been complying with direction under the Emergency Management Act in March 2021. And essentially it was when they were trying to cross the South Australia to Western Australia border during the time that Western Australia was like, oi, none of you fuckers can get in here. You've all got COVID. Piss off.
You walk across the border, we'll hit you with a shilka. And
We've actually, the reason that we're digging up all those mines is actually a big trench between Western Australia and South Australia. So we're thinking kind of a drawbridge situation for you filthy eastern states.
And it's a particularly serious charge with a potential of like 12 months jail time or a fine of like $50,000. So it's not small time. But of course, Mr. Culleton and Ms. Stewart put on quite a show of the usual kind of crazy bullshit from these. COVID isn't real. Fuck your border policy.
This whole goddamn system's out of order.
Yeah. Miss Stewart exclaiming 3 times that they do not recognize the jurisdiction of this court.
Yeah, classic sovereign
always
citizen
goes
bullshit.
well.
Like, I, the living person, with my unique soul, do not subjugate myself to the order of this court. And they're like, that's not how court works, buddy. You have to be here.
I just rather enjoy... I'll read a bit from the ABC article here, just like... It just paints a picture of this courtroom, which I think is rather great, which was Mr. Culleton unsuccessfully attempted to make constitutional arguments.
There it is.
As to why, they're innocent of this, claiming that the air highway where they were trying to cross was a Commonwealth jurisdiction. But the magistrate responded repeatedly that he did not understand Mr. Culleton's arguments. Just, I have no idea what you're talking about, the magistrate said at one point. And Mr. Culleton added, jurisdiction goes to the heart of the matter and where the WA police have prosecutorial powers to go forward. Mr. Culleton went on to say that he had not entered a plea, despite appearing at numerous pre-trial hearings last year, saying, "I am a Commonwealth officer," at one point, and the magistrate replied, "You're not a Commonwealth officer. You're a private citizen. Like, what you are saying is not true." To which Mr. Culleton replied, "Maybe what I did in Parliament then is just nonsense," which is possibly the most self-aware thing I think he's ever said.
Inadvertently extremely accurate.
Extremely accurate. Might be the only true thing he said.
I guess I'm a complete fucking idiot then. I guess I did fucking nothing in Parliament then.
Yeah. Fuck, maybe I need to reconsider everything I've ever done.
Maybe I need to consider all of my life choices that brought me to the precipice of this exact moment. Turns out my life has been a series of misendeavors that have brought me to this. Oh my God. Just like has a revelation there in the courtroom as he's testifying.
But then it got very interesting when, after those remarks, Miss Stewart, who had told the court that she was a registered nurse, said, quote, "In my opinion, you, the magistrate, appear not to be sober. Can we request a sobriety test? You are determining my future. I want to know you're sober." And then Mr. Culleton went, "Is that something we can request?"
Former lawmaker. Mr. Culleton says, "Is that something we can do?"
To which the magistrate responded, and I think this is particularly devastating, which is, "There has to be a filter on what you say in court, Miss Stewart, but it appears you have none."
Shots fired.
Yeah. I don't know. Do magistrates and judges go to school of sass? Like, they all seem to have well-constructed way to sass someone down whenever they're being.
I think it's a course in law school. You do torts, and then you do sass.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your dissertation on sass?
I actually did. I'd have a dual major in criminology and sassing the fuck out of nosy lawyers in my court. Yeah, but you're right, because all of these responses are very from judges are like a witty ripostes to things that are like actually quite insulting. Asking whether a sitting judge is sober. That was the reason for the fifth of whiskey joke that I made earlier. Although, given hearing the transcript, if I was to pick a person who I thought in this scenario might not be sober, it would not be the magistrate. That's
or were they just freewheeling this?
Well, I think they're representing themselves. By the man who represents Mr. Culleton is presenting constitutional quote unquote arguments. It sounds like he's acting as his own legal counsel.
A man who represents himself as an idiot for a client, I think, is the joke for that.
That was a good little tidbit. I mean,
it's wild, and there's so many other details in the story that, like, they're trying to get off technicalities, right? Like, they're arguing that their arrest happened in South Australia, so WA can't do shit because they're at the border.
You're trying to get into Western Australia,
that's the offence. I believe one of the arresting officers in their testimony said, no, like, you were actually on the other side of the border in the WA bit when we had our conversation. So, no, you were. And they were grilling him to be like, why wouldn't you take your mask down to show us your face and identify yourself at the time? He was like, because I didn't want to get COVID. Like, we're all masked up and there's a whole border because of COVID. Yeah, so it sounded like absolute chaos, and they're also just clogging all this up with their antics of, just being like, they refuse to identify themselves and stuff. It's all this like at the start.
Citizen, it's all anti-vaxxer, Freedom Party kind of fucking nonsense, right? It's all these, like, oh, why are you wearing a mask? It's like as though they don't live in the same world that we do and haven't done for the last 3.5 years. Like, it's just like people ask, they go, why do you focus so much on the anti-vaxxer stuff? Why do you focus on the freedom marches and all that sort of stuff? It's like exactly for this reason, because people get into positions of real political power with these mind viruses. These views are toxic and they seep in, and it's normally not a problem if it's just like 1 to 2% of the lunatic fringe that goes out on, Dan Andrews is a dictator marches. It's not a problem when it's that, but when they achieve real political power, as Rod Culleton has done in the past, and then they can start to influence policy, that's when it becomes really pernicious, right? It's like no one, like Hitler was elected. You know what I mean? Fashion from Hugo Boss and fascism creeps in. It never just goes, it's a bunch of people wanting to take over the government, which we've got another story about that coming up. But it starts as a bunch of Looney Tunes on the lunatic fringe. And then you get, I don't know what it is, 10, 15, whatever the critical mass is, 25, 30% of people that buy into this lunatic view. And then you get other people that pile on and see it as a way to advance themselves in their careers politically. And you get these people piling on to the extent to which all of a sudden it becomes a majority opinion, or it's seen, there's enough people that consider this point of view useful to their political aspirations that they pile on. And then all of a sudden you've got a majority, and then, even if it's a very slim majority, and then once people like this are in, then it's almost impossible to get them out, because then they will use the democratic apparatus against itself, and then turn it on itself once they're in charge. And that's a story that we've seen with fascism over and over and over again throughout history. It is very rare that someone comes in conquering like Alexander the Great. It usually, at least in the modern era, fascism happens by degrees, by slices. And it's by letting it go, I think, that you empower the movement to keep sort of growing and gathering steam. By shedding light on it and talking about it and discrediting the ideas and pulling them apart is the only way that you get to really disincentivize people from joining in at the earliest. You have to start as early as possible, I think.
And I think exactly that is the kind of thing that we don't teach enough in the school level.
About critical thinking.
About just about fascism, the Nazis.
Yeah.
Hitler's history. We just hear World War II was bad.
No, I was taught pretty in depth about it, but I mean, it might depend what school you go to and what state and stuff.
Maybe I clearly didn't absorb it, and I was one of the nerds who actually at least tried. Like, people are always like, Tom, you're a nerd. You love doing schoolwork. It's like, no, I just do it. But like, I clearly didn't absorb maybe some of that sort of stuff.
Year 12 or 11, I did one of the core semesters was about the rise to power of the Nazis and how they got there.
See, we cover Nazism, but it was very much like we're doing history. Here's World War One. Here's World War Two. Here's Hitler. Hitler was a bad guy. Eddie Mabo, present day. And it was just and that was it. And yeah, we certainly didn't get into the anatomy of fascism and how those ideas permeate and resistance in the Nazi times. Also, a lot of the other people that Hitler killed, the headline figure is a lot of 6 million Jews, and that's it. It was like, well, actually, there were also millions of other people, like gypsies and Roma and homosexuals and all of these other vulnerable minority groups that were targeted by Hitler and the fascist regimes. Also, the affiliation with other countries with Nazism and with fascism, like in Italy with Benito Mussolini and in Japan. As well, they were also allied with the Nazis. I didn't get any of that until after. I didn't even know what the Soviet Union was until I hit fucking university. Can you imagine that? Not knowing. I understood the Berlin Wall fell, and that was a good thing. But the whole idea of communism and the Soviet Union and Vladimir Lenin and revolutions and Stalin and all of the atrocities there, none of that was in our history class. It's really
I did do an
stunning oversight.
The subject I did do a lot of that in was called Modern World History, and I did have to pick that subject. But I
didn't.
Yeah, we covered a bit of it in high school as well.
For someone who's so interested in it now, I find it really shocking that as an 18-year-old person out there and fully able to vote, I was lacking major historical context from the last century and had to find it myself and educate myself about it. It's a pretty stunning oversight of the education system.
We've discussed sort of how it starts. It starts at school, guys, and how it ends is with thousands of people storming Congress, which is what happened in Brazil this week.
Is it January 6, 2021? No.
January 9th, 2023.
2023 in Brazil. And
in scenes that were basically the same as Jan 6, and as well as some other stuff that we saw last year in places in the Middle East and other countries where people now, if you don't like the election result or a policy, your immediate response apparently is to storm the seat of power.
And I think it goes back to what I was saying before, where fascism starts early. I think initially it's a conceptual dam that breaks. initially it's one nation senators saying a bunch of unhinged shit that they see and hear on the internet, and maybe it's you see something like January 6th happen at the Capitol with Donald Trump, and that conceptual dam sort of breaks for people, and the people around the world go, oh, democracy is a lot more fragile than we realize. Maybe we could storm the Capitol as well. It's like once the mind virus is out, once that bad idea escapes and gets into people's heads, it's really difficult to shove that genie back in the bottle, so to speak. And it seems like that's what's happened here, is that basically Jair Bolsonaro, who lost the Brazilian election some months ago, has taken almost all of his cues from Donald Trump, setting up the idea that the election was fake and results would be falsified. He lost by a slim margin. And then, encouraging people to get out onto the streets and try and reclaim power by any means necessary. I mean, that's how it happens.
So this happened it was at around about now that the new Brazilian president had just sort of started their term effectively, it'd
been elected for a couple of weeks, but he'd been elected.
I forget what they call it in the States. I've done a huge mental blank. Not a coronation.
Inauguration.
Yeah. Essentially that has happened, and then they stormed it. But a delicious aspect of this that I saw being touted around was that, so these pro-Bolsonaro people storming Congress were also calling for like the military to intervene and oust the new guy, right? Being all like, military, come in and do it. And they've got banners being like the military
saying military intervention. They're just like, hey, overthrow the democracy, please.
Yeah, but then there's videos of the military showing up and, they're walking in stone-faced with their guns and everything, and all these protesters are going, yeah, they turned up, overthrow the government, woo! And they're cheering them all in, and then they just go, down on the ground, and just arrest the shit out of all of them.
Down, motherfucker!
They just cheered on the people who then arrested them.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of Schadenfreude.
Hundreds, unlike I think they did in the US, where it was all sort of retroactive. In Brazil, they were like rounding them up by the truckload. And Brazilian jails aren't very fun, from what I hear. So
jails aren't. I don't think there are jails that are fun.
Well, I mean, they're worse than other jails, put it that way.
The thing that was interesting about this riot is that it attacked all three different branches of government at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was the Supreme Court, it was the Congress building, and the presidential palace at the same time, which in that way was actually more coordinated than January 6th in that regard. And a lot of Brazilian commentators have been saying, like, essentially with the information ecosystem as it is, there's nothing we could do to prevent this. Like we knew that there were people organizing, coalescing online, or there were reports of it, and there was just basically nothing we could do about it to stop it.
Yeah.
When people show up in that overwhelming numbers like that, I mean, like there's not a hell of a lot that you can do.
Interestingly enough, Bolsonaro was in Florida.
Yes,
this happened.
Yeah, where I believe you can't be extradited back to Brazil, I think, was the thing that I heard about that. It's just, hey, in Florida, just hanging out with my boy DeSantis.
It's crazy. I think, and like this comes after I think the Iraqi parliament got stormed, the Sri Lankan palace or parliament got stormed, and obviously Jan 6. It's happened to at least 4 countries that I know of now. Like it's. I mean, and in all of these cases, it hasn't actually done anything. I mean, I'm all about for holding people powers to account, but in many ways, it just makes the place. Yeah, it makes everything look chaotic. But obviously, like the things with Brazil, like it's a large population. There are thousands and thousands of people that believe in this sort of thing. And now, to George's point about the sort of the slide to fascism, if you will. It's very hard now at this point to really change a lot of this. Like, these people are now set in their ways. They're not going to turn. Some people will turn, but most of them won't.
There were countries, like Myanmar is a good example. We saw that video of the woman dancing to the coup that was happening in the background. Do you remember that clip?
Yeah,
and push and thrust and jump and what is going on with all those armored vehicles? You see this slide to fascism. And in some countries, the democratic institutions uphold, like in America, like in Brazil, but sometimes they don't, like in Myanmar, where the military junta says, yeah, we've had enough of this democracy stuff. Everyone's going to jail. That does happen. And then you are seeing that backsliding in particular countries, like in Hungary as well, with Viktor Orban, where, yes, it was an election, but no one internationally described it as a free and fair election, due to the stranglehold on the media and voting locations and all these sorts of things. So I think we are seeing, in particular places, actual democracy backsliding. Certainly Russia couldn't be described as a free and fair election, open democratic country, as much as it would like to convince us that it is one. I think we are seeing democracy in danger all across the globe. And I think it is, like, conceptually, like, we are getting into some like collective unconscious kind of Jungian psychology stuff here, philosophy. But like, I do think that there is a conceptual dam that breaks when you see something like January 6th that gives a permission structure, because we draw so much of our culture, so much of our news, so much of our the leadership in the world and our global identity comes from America. Then when you see things like that happen there, it enables all of this backsliding to happen elsewhere.
Also happened like with the Arab Spring back in 2011. Like, I can't remember where it started, but by the end of it, there were like 6 countries that were trying to overthrow their. It was Egypt's where it started. Sorry, but by the end of it, there were about 6 countries where there were massive protests trying to overturn the government. Now, arguably, some people have said that was just all CIA, motivated stuff. But
I've seen the documents.
And obviously, a lot of the countries where they were protesting weren't necessarily democracies. But it does show the power of that psychological thing of like, oh, these guys are doing it, we could do that too. And the through line then becomes, this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's bad.
So don't storm your parliament. Just write them a very angry letter.
Very angry letter. Or vote. Or join a political party and knock on some doors for the next election. Like, if you need to be involved, be involved. Send fucking letters. Like, but participating in democracy has to be done, if it is to remain a democracy, has to be done in a non-violent way. Start your own party.
The Great Australian Party, which is no longer got any members.
Party. Okay, we'll form a new age of golden prosperity. We'll call it the golden dawn of a new age. Why have you guys got all these SWAT stickers? What's going on? Who's that? Prince Harry? Well, that's weird. What's he doing here? Is that Dom Perrottet?
Weird segue now. Apparently, there's a shortage of diabetes medication, and the reason is something that I had not even conceptually understood was a thing.
Really?
Influencer culture.
That influencers are taking diabetes medication to make themselves thinner.
Oh, yeah. This sort of stuff has been happening for ages. It just changes whatever, either it's, those cleansing teas, which really are just like weapons grade strength laxatives. They're just like, you drink this tea and then you shit yourself so much that you lose weight.
Hello, I'm Helga. Drink Bang energy drink. If they work, influencer culture works, and it works to promote and incentivize people to engage in harmful behaviors and sell products, because capitalism. And so I'm just struggling to imagine a world in which Adam is just so disconnected from the world of influencer culture.
A lot of weeks now, being
perma-banned from Facebook, still unknown reasons. Really must have done you some good. But so people on, I think particularly TikTok, have been hailing something they call the skinny pen, which is really a medication. I'm going to butcher this. They call it Ozempic.
Yeah.
Is the brand name?
Yeah, so that's the branded name.
Yes. Semaglutide?
No.
Semaglutide?
Semaglutide is the actual, the base name of the drug. So what it is a drug developed to treat type 2 diabetes by lowering blood sugar levels and regulating insulin. So obviously for those who have diabetes, or, diabetes sort of adjacent diseases where their pancreas has difficulty regulating their blood sugar. This drug seems to have been a particularly effective treatment that's emerged since 2017. But because it regulates your insulin and stops you feeling hungry, a bunch of influencers over in America are using it for its weight loss effects. And that means that there's a shortage for people who need the medication who have diabetes.
Yes.
Necessary for them to live.
Get prescribed this for weight. It's a prescribed drug, though, isn't it?
Yes. So there's differences in the American and Australian systems as to how these, drugs are prescribed and how that works. In America, if you can find a doctor who can prescribe it off-label, which means to prescribe a drug for another purpose. So say you've got headaches, I prescribe you ibuprofen for your headaches, but I might prescribe you another drug that also works for headaches but isn't made and tested specifically for headaches, then that would be prescribing it off-label, right?
Right.
So you can still prescribe the drug if it's safe enough for the person to use for this effect, for a effect for which it is not directly intended. So this happens a lot in psychiatry. As to whether it should or not, I'm not sure. But you might get prescribed, for example, a drug which is specifically an antipsychotic, right? And that name sounds very scary, but it's yes, it's technically an antipsychotic. That's what it's been tested for, but it has these other effects which might prove beneficial in some other way for your specific condition. Anyway, so what happens in America is that you get prescribed off-label for this medication, and then as long as you're happy to pay out of pocket, it's about $1,300 a month, which is nothing if you're a millionaire, then you can just take it for weight loss reasons, for example. And that's what people are doing. And everyone's favorite Twitter shithead, Elon Musk, credits the use of this drug with his slamming physique, which I don't know if you guys have seen Elon Musk in recent memory. He kind of looks like a white sack full of potatoes. I wouldn't say that he's necessarily looking particularly fit, ripped, and healthy, as he said. But he's credited to that physique, to a combination of fasting and injections of the drug. So
that sounds like him making a joke. Again, I don't want to be defending Elon Musk, but what? He can't have been serious.
Well, I
don't think he's ever been serious a day in his life.
So this and a bunch of Hollywood, it's been sort of like an open secret in Hollywood that a bunch of celebrities and actors
must use it to lose weight quickly for roles or whatever, for a role
or for appearing on the red carpet, or for those sorts of things. It's Andy Cohen tweeted recently, I guess this is in advance of the Golden Globes, that everyone's showing up 25 pounds lighter. What happens when they stop taking Ozempic? Which is pretty ruthless slam from Andy Cohen, giving no fucks. But and
it's real fucked.
A lot of people.
What other side effects does it have if it's regulating your insulin? Does that mean if you stop taking it, then all of a sudden your insulin will your body freaks out? What happens then?
I don't know if it freaks out, but the effects are not durable. So essentially when you're off the medication, all of your weight will return. It's a medication like anything else. There are going to be side effects. I'm sure there's dangers. But all of these different influencers on TikTok in this Fitspo, Thinspo, anorexic adjacent kind of female influencer kind of space, basically, posting stories, talking about it. And the problem is, it's one of those self-reinforcing things. The more you talk about it, the more people hear about it, the more people then go and look it up. And so I feel, I was kind of debating whether to talk about this or not, because I don't want to feed into the exact same diet culture fad. I hope that our listeners are smart enough to not do that. But I think it's really disturbing that all of these people on TikTok, influencers, celebrities, are basically spruiking this wonder drug, as they're calling it. And it's just, there's another fucking way of commoditizing people's bodies, and which leads to eating disorders and body dysmorphia. It's did we not have enough fucking Fitspo, anorexic adjacent fucking horseshit on the internet already? Do we need, another drug, another fucking fasting ritual fit tea, cayenne pepper and lemon rind bullshit fucking thing circulating the internet, which is bad for people's health and mental health? I don't think so.
Well, and it really, I've been thinking about this a lot this past week as well, in that Like there really needs to be, huge shifts in people's attitudes around what constitutes healthy or body. Like attractive bodies and things like that, because like that's it's a chicken and the egg kind of thing, I suppose. But it's a lot of stuff that drives people's, like, people want to look this thin because they're told that that's what gives you your worth or your attractiveness. But so, and that comes from many things. It can come from social media influences, from film, from music, from magazines, all these sorts of things. Like, I was thinking recently, what brought it up for me was I read an article in the Canberra Times when I was in Canberra the other week, where someone was talking about how painful it was to sit through watching Love Actually with their daughter for Christmas.
For so many reasons, but
for so many reasons.
But which of the reasons are you talking about, Tom?
And they listed a whole bunch as being like why they thought the movie was crap. But
what if Keira Knightley didn't come to the door? What if it was the husband? Andrew Lincoln sitting there with signs saying, "To me, you are perfect," and then his buddy opens the door. This is a terrible plan, Andrew Lincoln. What are you doing? Get back to killing zombies.
I don't know. Well, either he tells Keira Knightley that he likes her, or he tells his best friend that to him he's perfect, and then he's like, "Oh, thanks, bro." But no, what Andrew Lincoln did was fucked.
Say it's carolers.
He was. What he did was fucked, no matter what. Anywho, but no, the particular thing I was going to bring up was that there's a whole one of the side plots involves everyone thinking that Prime Minister Hugh Grant's new assistant is fat and unattractive.
Yeah. When she's not, she's slightly above average, maybe slightly above movie thin weight, and she's gorgeous because of course she is, because she's in a fucking movie. She's a bit fat, isn't she? I'm like, no, she's hot as hell. What are you talking about? Everyone's expectations in this movie are crazy.
Yeah,
Liam Neeson's cheating on his wife. There are no consequences. What the fuck?
You mean Alan Rickman?
What did I say? Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson's one with the dead wife.
Yes, he is in that movie, but it's a different.
He is in that film.
I was thinking. But
Alan. And there's heaps of other movies that have done similar things, like Bridget Jones, for example, right? We're told this woman is unattractive and quote unquote frumpy, when it's like, well, no, she's not.
It's Renee Zellweger. She's gorgeous.
Stop. And I don't know, just people's attitudes really need to shift, and that starts in a lot of different places. But and a danger of that is suddenly diabetic people might die because they can't access medication they need to live.
There's a backlog for up to 3 months for this medication now. And
great. Hope you don't need it in the next 3 months.
Hope you don't have fucking diabetes for 3 months. I guess you should go ahead and not have diabetes.
If you could hold off on the diabetes for 3 months, that would be really great for our supply chain. Thanks.
Yeah, Carla needs to, she's getting married next week, so if you could just not have diabetes. She needs to lose a couple of pounds to get into her wedding dress, so.
Yeah, so it's awful, and nobody wins.
Do you think that, so the company that makes the drug, Novo Nordisk, do you think because from their perspective, they don't really care who takes their drug, right?
As long as people are buying it.
As long as people are buying it. I don't know if they've necessarily done much to discourage.
They might care. They'll care as soon as all the people who are taking it specifically for weight loss, who aren't diabetics, taking it a lot, and it, I don't know, gives them all the kinds of cancer or something, whatever the side effect of taking something that regulates your insulin when you don't need
bloody epidemic.
Yeah, when you are taking something that regulates your insulin when your insulin does not need regulating, whatever the long-term effects of something like that.
Just double the dose, Tom. Don't worry about it.
Oh, yeah. Just, keep calm and carry on. So if something like that happens, they'd probably really care, because they're like, oh, no, our brand is associated with, I don't know, really harming people. But no, you're right. I guess when I said before, no one wins. Well, the pharmaceutical company wins because they get a lot of money. And, finally, the pharmaceutical company gets a break. Am I right?
When's the pharmaceutical company finally going to get a win, you guys? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, they've had a really rough time of it.
It's disturbing, and it is just one of another, a litany of things that go into this diet fit culture. Which I find so gross, and influencers in particular, I find are really gross about this. There's lots of influencers that it's all about clean eating, and it's changed from Thinspo back in our day when we were growing up to Fitspo, and so now there's all these people like lifting weights and on Instagram and TikTok, and it's all about their workout and their clean eating and their diet.
They're wearing sweatpants though while doing it though, aren't they?
They are wearing yoga pants while they're doing their squats. They seem to do a lot of leg day and not a lot of any, just a lot of squatting.
And the camera's always set up from behind.
It's weird. The camera's behind them. You can't really see the technique, but you can see the whole asshole, which is the important thing. So
yeah, definitely.
But it's it does. The culture sort of morphed from like thinspo and anorexia inspiration. Like, that's not acceptable. It's not okay to be too thin. But it's like, it's just transformed into this new thing. It's like, it's not thin. It's about being fit, right? It's about being extremely fit, working out 10 times a day, limiting your calories, eating clean, eating broccoli and chicken and brown rice. But it's still the same thing in another guise. And so you'll see all these people. The thing that really shits me is the influencers that talk about body positivity. It's all about body positivity, right? I want you to love your body. But in order to love your body, you need to subscribe to my workout program for $49.95 a month and come and do yoga with me and eat exactly how I tell you to eat. You know, it's just another manifestation of the same thing. And
but also conveniently sorry, no, finish your point.
I was just going to say young girls in particular, and we've seen studies on this, are very vulnerable to this kind of messaging, particularly through social media, Instagram, TikTok. And it results in, this is like undisputable, with the rise of social media, the rise of Instagram, a direct correlation between, as a young woman, your exposure to these kinds of social media and a decline in your mental health. And it's something that we're just not addressing. We're just dropping a time bomb into the next generation of young girls and going, hope you don't get too fucked up. See you when you're 30 and you're no longer of use to society.
Yeah, but also I feel like a thing I see is their concept, like, you know, these, now it's being all Fitspo, their concept of fitness still kind of seems to conveniently line up with the Thinspo kind of look. Because my fiance and I were talking about this the other day. Well, but people would say, like, all these kind of like really toxic people would look at someone like Lizzo and be like, nah, that's not healthy. Oh, she's fat. Da, 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 da. Have you seen a Lizzo show? She does like a good 2 hours of like jumping around, dancing, singing, twerking, and playing the flute at the same goddamn time, and can do splits and stuff. Like, she's fit as fuck. Like, I couldn't do that. Like, that takes a lot of strength and fitness.
Yeah. But at the same time, I'm wary of saying, like, you know, because there's the movement in the opposite direction where it's sort of celebrating people being morbidly obese. Say, oh, you can be healthy at any size. It's like, well, not any size. Like, it's a spectrum. Like, we should have a healthy respect for exercise and what we put into our body and what we eat and how active we are and those sorts of things. But I guess the lesson is you should be comfortable in your skin no matter where you are in your sort of health and fitness journey. And there's times I've been much better about what I eat, and times I've been worse about, you know, what I eat, and that's affected my mental health and my weight and all those things. It's a balancing act. I don't think it's the right message to say, like, just eat cake and don't exercise forever, because that does have negative health effects. If you smoke and drink and eat badly, that will have negative health effects for your life. Yeah. But it is weird that people feel very entitled to comment on other people's bodies and what they're doing and what's healthy and not healthy. I think that's fucking weird. Like, that is
that's
very
real
personal,
fucking weird. 100%.
Very personal thing to me.
Don't do that.
It's just be like, oh, this person's unhealthy. It's like, well, you're probably doing a bunch of stuff that's unhealthy as well. Like, who are we to, like, why are we all criticizing each other? We should be trying to support each other on this journey. And here's the thing. If you drink water, if you exercise 5 times a week, if you eat right, you still die at the end of the day. You still end up dead just like everyone else. So
like, when you're on your deathbed, you won't remember that you went to the gym 5 times a week. You will remember that amazing fried chicken. So
it's a balance. Everything in moderation. Health and exercise. It can be overdone in the other direction too much. Orthorexia is what it's called in men, where they're, you know, like the Liver King, all these people that are obsessed with lifting and supplements and steroid use, and, you know, so they can sculpt
and calorie counting and all this sort of stuff.
It's all a kind of different ends of the spectrum of body dysmorphia. If there is a goal for any of this, it should be to get to a place where you feel fit and healthy, and your diet and the activity in your lifestyle serves you, right? And the how you look and your weight and your body is less important, especially to the world, than it is to, like, yourself and how you feel about yourself and your partner. And, like, I feel like it's a much more personal thing than all of these influencers are lead us all to believe that it is. And yet, people like Steph Claire Smith,
I don't know who that is.
She's just an influencer on Instagram, but she's her and the other one, Lauren, I forget the other girl's name, have created this multi-million-dollar brand, Keep It Cleaner, and they're sponsoring fun runs, and it's all about fitness, and people see people becoming millionaires off this kind of branding of themselves and their body and fitness, and so they think, oh, that's a desirable lifestyle. But it isn't necessarily. I think it feeds into the same culture that it's alleges to sort of criticize. It's like, oh no, we're about body positivity and fitness. But now you've got a bunch of teenage girls who are comparing themselves to you and feeling inadequate in order to get them to buy your products.
Yeah.
Capitalism, George.
It's capital. At the end of the day, how many episodes could we finish with, and it was capitalism all along?
Yeah. Probably most of them.
You're right. It really, there is when there is a money-making imperative, whether it's to sell you, it's that line from Mad Men, men like me invented nylons. What is it?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
I have not either.
It's basically talking about how the advertising industry creates problems for them to then turn around and solve with products.
Oh yeah, creating problems that don't exist and selling the solution. Yeah, that's just what advertisers do.
Fucking smart, guys. I don't know about you, but that's
here we go. So the quote from Don Draper: "The reason you haven't felt it is because it doesn't exist. What you call love was invented by guys like me to sell nylons. You're born alone and you die alone, and this world just drops a bunch of rules on top of you to make you forget those facts." God, that was grim.
That's very grim. That's very bleak.
Yeah, that's a good primer. On that note. Good primer for Mad Men. On that note, we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that make you feel bad about your body and yourself, that do or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and of course, motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me on my new Instagram channel where I'll be, I don't know, influencing people with my deep habits of chicken and beer.
And flipping the bird to Zuck.
Flipping the bird to Zuck.
I thought you were going to start doing like a fitness program that I should subscribe to so I can get your abs.
You should probably get my abs, which are covered in hair and definitely quite chunky.
It's more of a slab.
They're fuzzy and warm
than a six-pack.
More of a gelatinous sort of rolling, what do they call it? Stress ball that you can sort of squeeze for fun.
Nice.
Have you actually got a new Instagram? Are you trying to get around the...
I have a new Facebook and you should accept my friend request.
I'm not on Facebook. I don't do this to myself.
I can see the Facebook. I can see you on there. Accept it so I can message you.
No, I'm not doing it. I refuse. The only reason that I've still got a Facebook is because we've got a Facebook fan page and I need to be able to post things to the Facebook fan page as an administrator. That's the only reason the account exists. So if you've been trying to invite me to parties, this is a public service announcement. You're trying to invite me to parties or to dodgeball or to any of these things. I'm not getting the messages. I'm never going to get the messages. You'll never see me again because I'm not on Facebook. The account is there in name only. I'm not interested.
Okay, but you accept so I can message you on Messenger? Messenger?
No. We're on Discord.
You don't want to use Messenger?
Nope. Not if I can avoid it. Go fuck yourself, Zuckerberg. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.